Now that you understand how to use the configuration manager, let's go ahead and talk about how we would create a new configuration using the wizard approach. To create a new configuration for a shortcut for dbDOS, all we have to do is click the new configuration. The first thing that comes up is the configuration name and description. First thing I want to do is put in a name for this. So I'm going to call this dbase 5. And we're going to call this example 1. Now that I know which the name is, and now I have a description, I can go ahead and click the next button. Now on the button bar down at the bottom, you have 3 buttons. You have the advanced button, which will take you into the advanced wizard, which is a single page wizard, or we have the cancel button, which will basically exit us out of this configuration and take us back to the configuration manager, or we can hit the next button, which will take us to the next step. The next step, when we hit that, is going to take us to the mounted drive configuration. What's interesting about dbDOS is that it has to know where the files are located on your machine. To do that, it loads or mounts a drive with those files. Let me give you an example. Let's create a mounted drive. That's what we're going to do to add a new drive. As far as the dbDOS is concerned, it doesn't know anything about your hardware or software. So we have to tell it what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Create Mounted Drive. Notice it comes up and it says Add Path to Mount. And it says Physical Path. It also has Mounted Drive and it makes default, and it has an OK and Cancel button on here. Now the first thing I want to do is go ahead and click the little file. When that comes up, that's going to bring me to the Browse for File or Browse for Folder interface or dialog. I'm going to go ahead and click on Computer, and in this example, my database or dbase is located in dbase old. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the dbase old and hit OK. Now notice it returned back C:\dbase old, and then it asked me what drive do I want to associate that directory with. So for this one, I'm just going to keep it as C, and I'm going to say OK. Since I have defined a C drive, if I click on the little default area over here, I can delete that and recreate it as much as possible. If I had multiple drives, I could set different directories to be the default directory. What it means to be a default directory is that that's going to go out and look for all the executables, or that's going to be your starting directory or your starting drive when you run your configuration. So for me, this looks good. Now what I want to do is I actually run dbase.exe. To do that, I can come in here and I could either type in dbase.exe, or I can hit the little home button right here. The home button is going to show me all the executables in the directory that I have there. If I cancel out, we're going to go back to our structure here. You'll notice it right now. It says, hey, I think you're making a command prompt. Notice how it says C:\dbDOS. That means I'm going out to a command prompt configuration. When I hit my house and I want to go to dbase.exe, I can literally come in there, say yes, and now it says dbase.exe. Notice that my icon over here changes to dbDOS.exe, which tells me that I'm calling an executable. Now, if I had any parameters that I wanted to add to it or anything like that, or configuration arguments, I could go ahead and put them into this line. If everything looks good from here, I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button. However, notice that now we're on step 2 of the configuration. I could also go back and reset or change some of the items before. So let's go ahead and click the next button. The next thing is going to be regional settings, and for most people this is going to be whatever it comes up with. So notice that I'm on MS-DOS, United States. United States is the keyboard layout, and I'm using 103. However, let's say I'm in some other location. I could come in here and say I'm 850, and I could also come into here and say that I'm under the UK, and I could pick that I'm using the keyboard layout of 168. However, that's not what's going on right now. I am actually 437, and I am in the US, and I'm in the US, and I'm using 103. Once that configuration has been set, I can go ahead and hit the next key. Now that I'm in the select your printer settings, and of course printers are always interesting in dbDOS and printing in general with DOS programs. So the thing is that we've now set the default to interpretive print, which allows you to have print preview with it. This also allows you to change the font, do a little bit of other configuration changes with it, but it gives you the output as designed. We also have a configuration which sends it out to RAW. This is used for situations where you have a printer that may or may not understand the escape sequences. We recommend that RAW is only used in specific situations if you're not having much luck with interpreted printing. As you know, it's very difficult to get printouts to look exactly like they did 20 years ago on the modern hardware, so we're constantly trying to figure out new ways to represent data coming from DBase and make it look as close to what you're used to. Once you've selected the print type that you want, whether it's interpreted or RAW, the next thing is hey, are you always going to be printing to the same printer? If you're always going to be printing to the same printer and you don't want to answer the dialog to choose the printer, you can actually set your configuration to choose a specific printer and it will always go out to there. The last option we have is the printing options, and this is the overall timeout for the print. Inside of dbDOS, the way it works is it waits for there's a break in the actual processing and it closes the buffer. So what we've set is we set that up to 5,000 now, which equals 5 seconds. And so that means that the program will basically wait 5 seconds before it actually closes the file. And we found that this is very effective. Now, each timeout can be set per configuration. So you could have one configuration set to 0, and you could have another configuration set to 10,000, 20,000. Just remember that every 1,000 equals 1 second. So when you're done with that, you can go ahead and hit the next key. Next is the display options, and we have a lot of exciting things to talk about in display options. Now, by default, the basic rendering comes up, and the reason why we put it as a default is because it's the most hardware acceptable. In other words, most hardware will handle the display without any problems. However, if you want to use any advanced techniques like full screen, or you want to set your size of your window, you're going to want to use overlay rendering or OpenGL rendering. My opinion, if you're on a Windows 7 box of any type, you can go ahead and pick the OpenGL, and that will give you the best performance and the best compatibility going across the board with the latest hardware and software. Only if you're having problems with the display or having a fuzzy screen or something like that would I actually go down to overlay, and if that's still causing problem, then I would go back to basic. But remember, if you go to basic, you don't get any of the advanced features. Only the overlay and OpenGL allow us to do the advanced features. But again, if you're running the latest hardware, you should be okay. Now, in the advanced hardware and the additional options for the display, I can either click full screen. Now, what that means is that's going to start off your configuration in full screen mode. So it's going to take up all the real estate. If you're printing or something like that and you're using interpretive printing, you can get a little bit of a problem with the windows getting confused of who's on top, because remember, in DOS world, when you were full screen, you owned everything. In Windows, it's just a screen. So keep that in mind if you're going to go full screen, that there are some additional issues that you got to deal with. Now remember, if you're in full screen, Alt-Enter is your best friend, because Alt-Enter will put you back to a window, and then Alt-Enter will put you back to full screen again. And by the way, in any configuration, if you're using overlay or OpenGL, that Alt-Enter will put you into full screen or take you out of full screen. But one of the new features we have this time is we actually can set the size of your window now. So you can pick the size of the window that you decide is the best for you. So for me, I'm going to come in here by 1280 by 600 for my window that I want it to come out with. Next, I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button. The last option I have is the launcher, shortcut, and options. Right now, I want to create a desktop shortcut, and I don't want to exit when I leave the application. So all the things are the way I want them, and now I'm going to hit the next. The last thing I have is a test configuration. So if I wanted to, I could come up here and test the configuration, see if I like it. If everything looks good, great. If not, I can hit the back button and go back and change whatever items that I want. Or I can just go ahead if I'm done with it and hit the finish button. Now notice, I got a dbase 5, the one that I just talked about, is set up now. Now, if I double click on this, it will of course kick off. Notice I have a dbase 5 example 1 up here. I could come into my configuration manager and also click the run button. When I click the run button, you'll notice that it'll kick off, and there's my new screen on the size that I have decided, which is 1280 by 600. And that gives me a pretty good thing. So if I would come in here and say question mark date, open close parentheses, there's the date. Now keep in mind that the larger the screen, sometimes the blockier it's going to look. And you may have to play with the resolutions before you find a resolution that works best for you. So again, inside of here, you can come in here, and if we said, oh, you know what, I really want to put that dbase, I want to change that resolution. Notice I clicked on, let me cancel out of here again. Notice I clicked on the edit configuration on dbase 1 example, and now I'm going to come in here and say next. All of my things are there, and I'm going to come into my screen, and let's say I want to change this to 1024 by 768, and then I say next, next. Now I can come in here and test it really quickly and make sure that it looks like I want it to, and it's going to come up here, and when it's done, it looks about the same as my last one. So I'm going to go ahead, go back, and I'm going to go back again, and I'm going to go pick another one, which I'm going to pick the standard, which is 640 by 480, hit next, next, and finished. And this time when I run it, you'll notice that it comes up in the standard window, and the screen looks really crisp because it's not actually exaggerating the size. But again, we give you that functionality out of the box so that you can go ahead and pick what's important to you, and so it gives you the best user interface possible. So thanks a lot for listening to how you use the Wizard